Hey, what's up, guys? It's there's nothing out there quite like a blowout to really get you interested in the history of the game of baseball. I was curious to know if there's any sort of precedence for what we saw earlier today. If you didn't watch this morning's game, I feel like I say this almost every video. If you didn't watch this morning's game, don't worry about it. We'll give you a little bit of a recap. So the Naps came out, scored 8 runs. I'm sorry, 7 runs in the first two and well, a little bit into the third inning of the ball game, all off of Bill Hogg. Way to take Bill out, and it wasn't pretty. I'll just say it that way. We'll go ahead and take a look here. We do have Bill Hogg pulled up here from Baseball Reference. And there are a couple of things that struck me as interesting as soon as I looked at him. One of the big ones is that he died later in 1909, actually, after he stopped playing at the end of 1908. Not really much of a pitcher. Those of you who like WAR are going to say, well, this isn't so great for 4 seasons. Yeah, his WAR, I'll tell you that, was probably not very good here in 1908, minus 0.9 for a guy who was a full-time player, 152 in the third innings pitched. That's not what you want to see. We talk about 1908 being the big pitcher's year, but it wasn't the big pitcher's year for Bill Hogg, I'll tell you that. Hogg is fascinating, though. So you read about this, and people talk about how at the time there was this attitude towards him that he was, some sort of real lazy person and that there were all sorts of problems and stuff. Well, when he passed away in 1909, it turned out that he had Bright's disease, which attacks the kidneys and is often accompanied by high blood pressure and swelling. They don't know how long he suffered with the disease, but it explains the illnesses that he had from 1907 to 1909. It's very interesting because Hogg was actually kind of a star pitcher before he hit the major leagues. In 1904, he had 33 wins in the Pacific Coast League, which made it look like this guy was going to be a real big star. He was playing with Seattle, it looks like. I, of course, haven't quite read this yet, and did quite well. He was trying to... He ended up switching over to Portland's PCL team, I guess, after a while. I'm sorry, no, he was with Seattle in 1903, the Clam Diggers. He was with Spokane in the PCL, there you go, in 1904, and that's when he really started his big winning tradition. And then he eventually went to the Highlanders in 1905 and came up to the big team finally in 1906. That's when he really had a chance. Now, in 1908... the New York Sun claimed that Griffith had 18 pitchers to choose from, but that Hogg wasn't a likely candidate. It'd be interesting to sort of look back into that. You do have to wonder about this and take it a little bit with a grain of salt, right? We've looked at some of these old newspapers, especially in Pittsburgh, and while there is some interesting stuff, it's not necessarily the case that every name that showed up actually had the ability to be in the major leagues. I guess that's why you have a whole bunch of guys. But, yeah, he had some trouble. May 26th, he went 9 innings and then was lifted, and then the Highlanders lost in the 10th. But then the next week, he lost to Boston 7-0, and then he was suspended for not being in proper condition and placed on waivers. They were trying to get rid of him. And then finally, a new manager came in, and they decided to put him back in the starting rotation. So he's actually on the club and will probably, for as far as we're concerned, continue to start for the Highlanders. Might as well. It's the Highlanders, whatever. But in reality, he doesn't have that many starts until really July. See, we're way up here in early May, which tells me that is probably the case that we're missing a transaction or two on the list that I have. This is one of those things where really you should be going through like player by player before the start of the season. Honestly, it's kind of what I wanted to do before I started this project, but it can be really, really time consuming and very mind numbing because you want to play games. You don't want to spend, like 30, 40, 50 hours just going from one player to the next, trying to figure out what day this happened and what day that happened. I bet we could find something about Bill Hogg, though, before May 26th. Anyway, though, he did have a couple of really poor outings. You can see in this one he gave up 13 runs to Cleveland, and he pitched, how many innings did this guy pitch? He pitched 8 innings in this game. My goodness, this is a wild one. I think what we're going to do here is we like to do, as I like to do at least, we're going to look this one up. It'd be the newspaper July 16th. So we'll take a look, see if we can find out more about this particular game, because that looks like an absolute wild one. So we will go to the Sun. What is it, July 16th? Yeah. We'll just take a look and see what we can figure out. The Sun's pretty easy to navigate. See, I came straight to the sports page, and here you go. New York's 50th defeat. And let's see, Cleveland 16, New York 1. First game was ridiculously one-sided, the second one close. The Cleveland's made 17 hits, so it will be noticed that they made a big proportion of runs to their hits. This is because long hits and bunched hits, not sure how visible this is to you, sorry, were made off Hogg, and because the fielding of the New Yorks was miserable. It was ragged and utterly unreliable, an occasional brilliant play merely standing out in sharper contrast with work of an altogether different nature. Anything else here about Hogg, of course, is a question that we have, and it doesn't look like there was much. Nobody really has mentioned the fact that Hogg stuck out there, or stayed out there and pitched 8 innings in this game, despite being totally shelled. Yeah, you kind of feel bad for the guy, at least I do, because he was not fully healthy and was not having a good time, and yet he was giving up runs left and right like it was no business and like there was no other. So that's kind of what happens, I suppose. It's kind of a shame to know that this sort of thing happens in the game of baseball. But there you have it. That is the story of Bill Hogg, the man who couldn't start very well. Just looking through him quickly, I'm kind of wondering how many complete games did this guy throw? He must not have pitched that many in 1908. He pitched a grand total of 6 complete games out of his 21 starts. So there you go. You wonder why people talk about complete games being a big stat. It's stuff like this that matters, because if you're not completing your starts in 1908, you're probably a pitcher like Bill Hogg. There you go. That's the story of Bill Hogg, the unfortunate man from Port Huron, who died actually in New Orleans, went all the way south and died not too long after the season that we are playing was over. There you have it. Talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.